Hey there, nature photographers. This is Lee Boy, and I am excited today to share with you a presentation called The Art and Science of Reading and Chasing Natural Light. Now, I'm recording up here at my home in the Davis Mountains of West Texas. My sliding glass doors are open, my back doors are open. Great, wonderful temperature outside right now. So occasionally you may get to hear some of the wildlife around, some of the birds yakking. Maybe that'll lend a neat little atmosphere to the image, so I want you to understand what you might be hearing there in the background. I also want you to know that this presentation is one of them that you'll be watching prior to a precision camera and video workshop out in Big Bend, or maybe one of my offer through Big Bend Birding and Photo Tours. But either way, I hope this will be a great opportunity for you to sit back and relax. And I believe this presentation, which is a new one I just finished not very long ago, is one of the more in-depth presentations about light that I've ever done. So I'm really excited. Let's jump right on in today and we'll get started. All right. Well, as I said, I'm owner of Big Bend Birding and Photo Tours. I do photography and birding tours out here in the Big Bend area, from Guadalupe Mountains all the way down to Big Bend and east a little bit, west a little bit. I love this area. It's my favorite place I've ever been. I love the desert, but I love desert mountains even better. So it's a spectacular place. Hope you can come join me on some other workshops and tours out here in Big Bend. I'm also very blessed to be a workshop instructor, photography workshop instructor for Wildside Nature Tours. I met Kevin Laughlin, the owner, who resides in Pennsylvania. We've become great friends, like brothers, and I've go to places all over the world like the Galapagos, Ecuador. We hit domestic stops like Grand Tetons, Yellowstone, so lots of great spots. Then Precision Camera and Video. I'm the lead photography adventure workshop instructor for them. And this is probably where you're coming through here for Big Bend if you're watching this video. I'm also doing places like Bosque del Apache. I'm going to do Panama. We just finished a Galapagos workshop for them. So lots of great destinations coming up, and I'm recruiting other photographers to do workshops for them. So stay tuned for that. Finally, I'm an OM System Pro Ambassador. That is one of the designations or achievements in photography that I'm most proud of. I had been a Canon user for 25 plus years. Got tired of the wait, got tired of some of the lack of features, saw some of the things going on in mirrorless. I tested Canon, Sony, and Olympus before I made the shift, and ultimately made the shift to the what's now OM System, and I've never looked back. So many great features, so many great controls and whatnot that many other systems don't have. So very excited to represent OM System ambassadors. And as I said, I'm recording here from the Davis Mountains of West Texas. What you see on the right is my home at nighttime. That's a September Milky Way shot. That's when the Milky Way is very vertical, early in the evening. And then on the left is the view off my deck, looking right over this way. To the west, spectacular. This is monsoon season. Yesterday we had some great rumbling thunder, but no rain fell here, but I've been getting some good rains up here the past few days, and that's one of the reasons I love folks coming out in summertime in Big Bend. Let's chase those monsoons. All right, without further ado, let's jump right on into today's class. So the topics for today are going to involve definitions. Okay, I need to set some foundation work for some of the terms we'll be using. The circadian rhythm of natural light. I want to cover how the day progresses and what the light is like throughout the day and night. We're going to talk about reading light, and this is light that the photographer can expect. You can kind of plan for it. There might be an occasional surprise, but overall, this is light that you can pretty much plan on finding either in specific locations or at specific times of the day. And then chasing light. This is working with light that is unpredictable. You can't really plan for it, and you got to react to it oftentimes very quickly. So those are some really key features in distinguishing light that you can read or wait on and light that you're going to chase. So let's jump into our first definition, which is natural light. What is natural light? Well, light which is produced by the sun, not the moon directly, but the sunlight obviously reflecting off the moon, over which the photographer has no control over the quality, direction, color, or the intensity. Again, those four characteristics of light: quality, direction, color, and intensity. We have no control over those. And that's what makes natural light much more challenging to work with. Whereas, sometimes you can add a little flash, fill flash, whole entire flash. You can use reflectors, diffusers, all kinds of things. That's artificial light. So here in today's lesson and class, we're only talking about natural light, okay? And this is, again, light produced by the sun or the moon. Again, sunlight reflecting off the moon, over which the photographer has no control over the quality, direction, color, and intensity of that light. Now, we need to define what color temperature is. And this is the higher a color temperature is, the closer it is to the blue end of the spectrum, like in the 9,000, 8,000, 6,000 Kelvin range. And the lower a color temperature is, the closer it is to the red end of the spectrum, like you get around 3,000 Kelvin. And these are all measured in degrees Kelvin, and the range is from about 1,800 to 10,500 Kelvin. And as you can see in that chart on the right there, that, sunrise, sunset, early morning when we get those reds, those oranges, yellows. And then as the day progresses, we tend to move towards roughly around 5,300, 5,500 Kelvin. That is about noontime in a northern hemisphere when you get that kind of bluish color. Now, if you get a cloudy sky, shades from clouds, very heavy shade, it gets even bluer. And then as the day begins to progress past noon, we work our way back down through color temperature. This is the color of the light that we see during the day. At various times of day, it varies, right? Now, we need to go from color temperature into white balance. White balance, it is not the same as color temperature. White balance is your camera's attempt to neutralize color temperature so that whites appear white. It works in the opposite direction to color temperature. So we want images, whether they have a warm or a blue cast to them, we still want whites to be white. In this image of a northern pintail at Bosque del Apache Wildlife Refuge in New Mexico, very warm, beautiful morning. You see the warm colors reflected there in the vegetation off the water and the warm color on the pintail. However, we want to make sure, as you notice there on the neck of that pintail, that the white is still white. Now you see the white patch near the water has a little bit more yellow to it, warm color. That's because there's more light reflecting directly off the water right there as it's closer. Now, if you look in the image at the bottom with these Rocky Mountain bighorn sheep in Glacier National Park, a little bit of an overcast day, shade provided by that cliff behind them, but you notice the snow is still white. So it has a blue appearance. It's much bluer, right? We would say cooler than the image above. The image above looks warmer. The image on the bottom looks cooler. But if you'll notice, the whites are still white, and that is how white balance works in our camera. It is attempting to neutralize color temperature so that whites remain white. So color temperature is the color, the degrees Kelvin of the light that you're looking at. White balance is your camera's function in trying to keep whites white regardless of what is going on with regard to color temperature. So let's jump right in then to the circadian rhythm of nature photography. We're going to be talking about the order of the day, and we're going to start from nighttime. We'll go through morning, through daytime, and back around to nighttime. So nighttime is strictly defined as when the sun is below minus 18 degrees on the horizon. So if you take the horizon, you go down minus 18 degrees or lower, that is when it is truly nighttime. That is when the sky is black. Now, why is the sky blue in this star trail shot I shot up here at my property? Why is the sky blue? Sunlight reflected off the moon, had a very bright moon. So there are times, even though it is strictly nighttime, and I put this image in here on purpose to illustrate that there are times where it is still appears blue at night. Last night, sleeping, had a strong moon. I think it was probably around 50-something%, maybe a little larger. And as I looked out the windows around midnight, I noticed still strong blue, still bright enough to see and walk around by. So really unique and cool shots you can get when you understand how to read light, particularly at night. Now, obviously, nighttime is great for astrophotography, Milky Way photography, star trails, moonlight photography. I mean, there's all kinds of photography, and we'll look at some of these different types of light even during night, okay? Now, so as nighttime moves along, you eventually get to what's called astronomical twilight. That is scientifically defined as when the sun is between minus 18 and minus 12 degrees. So below the horizon at minus 12 to minus 18 degrees is astronomical twilight. You can see stars at this time of night. You can see the Milky Way, you can photograph them, but the sky will always have a blue appearance to it. And it can produce some really unique images. A lot of people want to avoid it for some reason, but I actually kind of like photographing at astronomical twilight. This image, taken specifically in Grand Teton National Park, that is not the sun, that is the moon. So I shot to produce a moon burst, if you will. And you can see a few stars there in the image. They trailed a little bit because I had a very long exposure. I want to use a low ISO to get the really, really nice sharpness there in the snow. But even without the moon, the sky would still have a blue appearance to it because of the degree the sun is below the horizon, okay? Lots of great shots can be made at this time, but you generally got to be up early for this, you know? Now, nautical twilight. So we go from nighttime, astronomical twilight, into nautical twilight. Nautical twilight is specifically defined as when the sun is between -12 and -6 degrees below the horizon. This is a great time for landscape photography, as you will often get many pastel colors, as noted in this image in Big Bend National Park. The bright light you're seeing is not the sun, that is the moon. Okay, and you'll notice there's really nice pastels on the sky. The sun is below the horizon. It has not been sunrise yet. But as the sun is low, it's still casting its light up at a very sharp angle, creating these beautiful colors. The sky is blue, yet there's still some stars in the sky. And it is a spectacular time for photography. I can never remember who told me this. It was some photography friend. But he had a great line that said, most photographers show up too late and they leave too early. And he means they're often gone. You know, they sit there for sunrise. They get there right before sunrise, and they leave right after sunrise. Or they get there right before sunset, and they leave right after sunset. And they're missing many of the best times of color and light by not arriving earlier or staying later. Nautical twilight's a wonderful time to shoot. You're going generally, again, astronomical and nautical, I'm shooting on a tripod, very low light, long exposures. I don't know if you can hear the black-chinned hummingbirds out there behind me. There was some Woodhouse's scrub jays earlier, so occasionally you might get to pick up the sounds of some of the wildlife around the house. Now, next we come into civil twilight. Civil twilight is when the sun is at -6 to 0 degrees below the horizon. And here we get more of what we think of our yellows, oranges, and reds. Here you'll notice in this image in Big Bend that there's no clouds in the sky, but we still have a lot of yellow on the horizon. Part of that is because it is civil twilight, and a part of it is due to a lot of dust or haze or pollution in the air. We get a lot of pollution in Big Bend from Mexico City, so a lot of people don't realize, and we say a lot, it's relative compared to the pollution you see in some cities, but still it's enough at times to affect it. And you see how the sun is streaming across the various heights of the Sierra del Carmen's, producing some unique rays there. So civil twilight's a great time for photography. I'm still normally using a tripod, although occasionally you can get fast enough shutter speeds for handheld. But you're going to have generally a very bright sky depending if there's no clouds, and you're going to have to balance your exposure with the foreground or use graduated neutral density filters or the like. So civil twilight, again, this is when a lot of people often show up to photograph. You know, they'll start getting in place for sunrise. However, you can miss some of blue hour when you get there right at sunrise, because blue hour overlaps, okay? Blue hour overlaps blue hour occurs only within civil twilight. And when the sun is a little lower than the prior image, you get this unique blues on the foreground. So here you'll see a cloud is coming across the Sierra del Carmen's. You get some real mysterious images. You'll see some of that golden light in the back, but you notice how overall, because of the clouds, the foreground, you get this really nice bluish color. It does not last long, but it can produce some really nice images. You see, it's only when the sun's at about a 2 degree level at -6 and -4. So blue hour is during civil twilight. Then following that, we go into golden hour. So golden hour overlaps civil twilight and sunrise. And golden hour is often referred to as the magical hour. That's when you can capture a lot of really amazing landscape images. But what you have to keep in mind is that it's an overlap. It starts before the sun is visible, and it goes till after the sun is still visible. It's not a real long window. That the length of time it lasts can vary upon your latitude. Okay? So Here you see the sun has already risen, but it's still below 6 degrees, and you get some really nice, warm, golden light here. And to better show this scene, I used a long lens panoramic to capture this particular shot. Now, sunrise then is during sunrise in civil twilight. It is during the golden hour, and it is when the sun breaks the horizon, so it is right at 0 degrees. Now, if you've ever watched the sun actually rise as an orb, it goes pretty quick from the top to the bottom of it at the horizon. So sunrise is right when it begins to break 0 degrees. Here's a shot from Fort Davis up here where I live with the McDonald Observatory. Again, golden hour, so you got these beautiful warm colors hitting those clouds. If there's no clouds in the sky, it's often a very difficult thing to photograph. And when you're shooting at the sun during sunrise, you're going to have to make some exposure decisions. Here, I chose to preserve more of the sky than the foreground because I wanted the sky. The sky was what was going to carry the image. I mean, I've got the observatories over there, some nice detail, and there's still detail in the whole foreground. I could have used a graduated neutral density filter to hold back the sky, but I just chose to let the sun blow out and maintain and preserve more of the sky. So daytime is technically when the sun is higher than 6 degrees in elevation. And it is a dramatic difference often in light. If there's no clouds, I'm generally not doing much landscape photography. I'm moving on to macro, wildlife, something else that I might not initially had planned for the day. But this is all subject to unpredictable light due to storms, weather, clouds, other things we'll look at, right? So during the order of the day, daytime lasts the longest other than nighttime, right? Daytime is when the sun is above a higher elevation than 6 degrees. Now, obviously, if you get up at the North Pole, nighttime can be way longer than daytime at times, or if you get to the South Pole accordingly. Here, some dramatic clouds produce beautiful God rays landing on Kitten Mountain in Big Bend National Park. Clearly, the sun is well above 6 degrees, but it produces a spectacular image. So learning to relight the point of this class is why it's so important. Now, so we go through the whole day, and as the sun gets to just below 6 degrees in the horizon, we start golden hour once again. So golden hour is going to occur twice each day. And it may not be gold if you got socked in clouds or heavy rain or snow and other things like that. All depends on what the weather's doing. But we define golden hours when the sun is between 6 degrees and -4. Here you see the sun's already dropped below the horizon there. I'm just about to drop below the horizon there in Florida, giving some really nice colors to the sky. And again, sunset now when the sun breaks the horizon. Now the sun is gone below these mountains, but that's not the real horizon for me in terms of the overall arch of the earth. And you can see you got that beautiful golden light on the clouds there and some crepuscular rays coming off the clouds. The foreground is in shadow, so it has a cool appearance, whereas the background's getting lit up by the sun. So again, sunset, you don't want it to be there just when that's happening. There's lots of great stuff before and after. We, again, remember blue hour overlaps sunset. And so the blue hour in the evening is when the sun is between -4. I'm sorry, blue hour overlaps civil twilight. Sorry, I'm confused. So blue hour is, I need to edit the prior section on blue hour. Blue hour is when the sun is between -4 and -6 degrees. So it overlaps civil twilight. And this is a great time to get these beautiful pastels again, kind of like you'll get often at nautical twilight. But here at Elephant Tusk out in Big Bend, just gorgeous. Still got the warmth down low, but you've got this nice blue feeling overall. And then we're in, again, civil twilight when the sun is between 0 and -6 degrees. So the sun is just dropped below. There's no direct sun falling on this image, but I can still produce some very nice images. There was no wind, so I used a tripod and a long exposure to get a really nice sharp image because it was still low light. But you'll notice a nice cool cast to this particular image. Nautical twilight, so again, when the sun is between -6 and -12 degrees. So here the sun is well not visible, but its light is still being cast a little bit. In this image, I'm looking east in Big Bend. We had lightning. The purple sky is a result of the lightning, the way it impacts the nitrogen in the sky. So that's what's producing the color tones there. But so many people quit. They get in their car, head back, they want to go get dinner, but you miss a lot of great shots at nautical twilight when you do that. And astronomical twilight. When the sun is between minus 12 and minus 18 degrees, we find ourselves at a place where the sky is always going to be blue. You can still photograph the Milky Way. Here's a self-portrait of yours truly at Mule Ears in Big Bend National Park. But you'll notice, if you look, you can still make out the Milky Way just fine. This is back when the 4 planets were aligning. The first one there has just come over the horizon in the morning. But the sun is still fairly low, but the sky is blue. But you can still see the Milky Way, and that's a single shot Milky Way image. So, again, you got to let go of some of the preconceived notions you have. Nighttime is when it strictly defined is when the sky is black. But this is night, believe me, but the sky is blue. And we get back finally to nighttime when the sun is below minus 18 degrees. You can do things like this Milky Way image over the Chisos Mountains. The sky is a stacked, probably about 20 images stacked, and the foreground is a single long exposure, and then I blended the two in Photoshop. So nighttime is a great time to get out and photograph. So here you see a black sky, whereas the first image at nighttime I showed you still had a blue sky from a bright moon. All right, let's talk about some of the influences on light, quality, and quantity. Things that will impact what you see in natural light. Well, the first is cloud type, okay? Different clouds are going to produce different effects on the light quality and quantity. Big, thick anvil clouds, cirrocumulus clouds, it's going to block out a lot of the light, at least directly behind it if the sun's behind it. You'll get some nice rays streaming across the edges. But you get a altostratus cloud, and it's a kind of a thin, wispy cloud, and it's going to diffuse the light, but it's not going to hold a lot of it back. So different cloud types are going to have different effects on your light. The total percent cloud cover, right? I've got a great app that I'll share here with you in a minute that will give me the forecast on the percent cloud cover. If you have 100% cloud cover, you're not going to have a lot of light. If you have 0% cloud cover, it might be a great night to get out and do some Milky Way shots. I actually like some clouds on my Milky Way shots, but for a lot of people, they don't want any. Wind speed. How does wind speed affect the quality and quantity of light? Well, it may be moving clouds quite quickly. It may be bringing a lot of dust, haze, or pollution with it, right? Lots of different ways wind speed can affect the light that you're dealing with. So that's an important one to consider. Haze, fog, and pollution. All three of those. There's some days out here where we have enough dust in the sky you can look directly at the moon and it doesn't bother your eyes because it's so, the dust storms or haze or the fog is so thick, right? In fact, in this image on the right and from Yellowstone in winter, you see that the steam rising up from the geysers on this very cold day, it's really having a big impact on the image and the mood it gives it. Rainfall and precipitation. When you have a lot of precipitation falling, there's no doubt that it is going to have an impact on the light. And temperature. How does temperature have an effect on the quality and quantity of light? Well, very hot days, you can get some of those heat waves coming off the ground that can, trying to photograph something down low, and it's going to mess up your image. Very, very cold days produce some unique meteorological conditions that you definitely want to pursue. And temperature here, when it gets really, really cold, man, you can be crystal clear at times, when there's no humidity in the air. Humidity can have a big effect. So, elevation. The higher you are in elevation, the less UV's been filtered from it. And we'll take a look at that here in a little bit. The time of day, as we just looked at the circadian rhythm of the natural day, we see how time of day can affect light. Location. At the equator, when you're in, around Quito, Ecuador, the Galapagos, sunrise and sunset times vary almost none. I think the biggest variation in time is around Quito is like 5 minutes. You can predict your day very regularly that way. Whereas you get up to Alaska, man, day length varies tremendously throughout the year. And finally, reflection. Reflection off water, reflection off snow, reflection off nearby buildings and other things, asphalt, all that can influence the quality and quantity of light. Now, let me share with you some of the apps I use for landscape photography, and most of these are trying to ascertain the items we just discussed. Now, for my night sky photography, I have photo pills in this particular category. The fact is I use it for daytime, nighttime. I believe it's the best valued app I've ever purchased. It has more in-depth information, more features, more usefulness than any other photography app, and probably any other app on my phone, honestly. Yeah, you might use social media a lot, but I don't know that it's that beneficial for your life, right? Well, Photo Pills can help you with depth of field, where the Milky Way will be at any given date throughout time. It can help you plan for meteor showers. It can help you figure out what focal length lens you should use. It will tell you what shutter speed or things like that you need for stars, how to do star trails. It'll help you with time lapse by doing interval. And that's not even close to all the features, right? So Photo Pills is number one, and that's why you see it in the upper left in this collection of apps. Sky Safari Pro, that's my go-to app for determining where particular things are in the sky, whether it be the Milky Way, a specific constellation, meteors, where are different things going to occur in the night sky, the ISS, International Space Station. It's a great app. It's not cheap, but it is extremely useful. When they often move from one version to another, you upgrade. You'll get upgrades for a while, and then you got to buy another one. That's a little frustrating at times, but the app is outstanding. Stellarium is good. It's not quite as good as Sky Safari, but it does give you a different look at the Milky Way. It'll actually kind of let you look at your horizon a little better. Clear Outside is a phenomenal app. That's the one that will let you pick different locations, and it will give you forecasted cloud cover, precipitation, wind. It's really all about the cloud cover for me. That's the main thing, although the other stuff is good. Next, you see the Photographer's Ephemeris. I'll be honest, I don't hardly ever open that on my phone. You can do it on the desktop now. It's one I bought before Photo Pills. I think Photo Pills is much better for me. And then you see I use Mooncal and some other apps there for doing star tracking. Now, let's jump to the ones I use for weather. Windy.app is phenomenal for wind. It is great for many other features as well. It has a lot of information. You can add to that by upgrading to Pro. I haven't. It's one of those things where how many things can you upgrade to throughout the year? But it's probably now become one of my favorite apps. What you see, the My AccuRite, that's for a weather station I actually have located here at my house so I can know what's happening at home. The one I try to use the most is the Weather Channel. Now, it's ironic. I have a love-hate relationship with the Weather Channel's app. It is one of the worst at throwing ads at you. It is one of the slowest apps on my phone because they try to do so much stuff on this app rather than just give you the basic information. But it does have some good information, but it runs slow at times. 3G, it really doesn't work well. And we have some 3G spots out here in Big Bend. Storm Radar, some of these other ones I use some. Radar Scope, I like those. A lot of these apps start out great, and then over time I'll be just what seems like greedier and greedier. So I don't like it when you take away functions I once had and now want me to pay to upgrade to Pro. That just tells me you're probably not a great business planner, Lightning, though, I use a lot. That one you can designate a point, and I have a 200-mile radius around it based off my home, and it will tell me when and where lightning is striking. Tide Track I use for tracking the tide, and then Auroras for Aurora Borealis. So those are the apps that I predominantly use for landscape photography. Now, let's jump right into the category of reading light. Again, this is light that we can wait on, as it is often predictable, or at least, it's something you don't have to usually rush to capture. You can wait on it and be in place for it, but you're not generally, oh my gosh, we got to go, and get these shots, okay? This is where time of day often collides with weather to produce various types of light, okay? So time of day and weather come into play here. So for example, soft sunlight. Now again, this is when the sun is going to be 6 degrees above the horizon, but in this particular image, we have a lot of dust, haze in the air, and it softens. It's like a giant diffuser. So I shot a long lens panoramic here, and beautiful depth to the foreground, beautiful colors and a little bit of texture to the sky, and a real soft, pleasing, warm, inviting image here. Same spot as the prior image. I'm looking the other way, and obviously on a different date when it was very foggy. There's this kind of lone mesquite tree that's right near the sidewalk, and I included part of the sidewalk, even though I really don't generally do man-made objects because I like the shadows there. And again, it's actually fairly bright. The fog was somewhat thin, but as you can see, it still functioned to diffuse a lot of the light. Here in the Galapagos, I'm laying on my belly. These Espanola mockingbirds are quite tame. They come up very close, so you can lay down and get nice wide-angle shots. If you'll notice, there's a slight hint of a shadow below the bird. Very slight, though. You can still see all the detail in that shadow. That's because the sunlight is being diffused by those clouds, so it's still bright enough to have plenty of light to shoot by and a fast enough shutter speed to stop the wave pretty well, but light enough to give a really cool kind of, soft feel to the overall image. Even though the sand and rocks are rough, it still is somewhat of a soft image in that sense. Not soft in terms of focus. Here again, I'm on the Alaska Photography Adventure Workshop through Wildside. These stellar sea lions are on this rock. The light angle, had there been no clouds, would have been awful. This would have been a very harsh, ugly shot. But because of the clouds, the sunlight was somewhat diffused. You still see a little bit of an edge, a light edge on these stellar sea lions. But, I saw this big male raise up, and I knew he's probably going to yawn, started shooting away. And again, the soft sunlight really helped to give a lot of detail and information. Whereas if there were no clouds, this might not even make this wouldn't even be a good black and white. Gray light. Gray light gets looked down upon by many photographers, but I often find many great things to shoot in gray light. For example, like this cool winter scene here in Grand Teton National Park. Very cold, somewhere between minus 15, minus 20 degrees. Here we have a very gray day on a ranch in South Texas, out shooting with a good friend, Butch Ramirez, on this ranch where they don't do any hunting, so there's really too many deer. But many of the deer grow up and get massive. So, it's a great place to go shoot these bucks. And here you can see in this image that it has a gray appearance, but because it's been somewhat moist earlier in the day, the color saturation is pretty nice. This is a November day, and that looks like a typical November day throughout Texas. Here in Alaska again, the gray light, because it was midday, helped me have a usable shot. Had there been no heavy gray clouds, the sun would have been so harsh I wouldn't have even bothered to take this shot. But here you have a young eagle. And what I find here is that gray light actually lends itself to a little mystery because the trees poke out a little bit. And so had it been a solid gray background, I probably still would have taken the shot. I don't know if I would have liked it as much. Soft gray light. So now this is where the fog might be a little closer, a little more intense. These crested caras are in it, but yet those mesquite trees in the back still shine through. You can see the moisture down there on the vegetation right behind. But I think it's a unique look, again, a typical November day in Texas, South Texas. Soft gray light. You could argue this isn't quite as soft, but I think it is because of the density of the steam coming off. This is Dragon's Mouth in Yellowstone National Park. And again, you don't have a real sharp crispness to the trees. It has that soft texture-like feel because there's enough light coming through to light the scene, but it's gray enough and thick enough to give it a real soft feel over there. When you're doing wildlife, man, this lets you shoot wildlife often much longer throughout the day than you otherwise might be able to. Had the light been out, had the sun been harsh on this image, the underwings would be black, the head would be in shadow, there would be no point even shooting that shot. The water would be ugly, but due to the soft gray light, I was able to capture this tricolored heron as it a juvenile tricolored heron as it was hunting, and they have a very unique hunting style and getting some really weird poses. Dark gray light. On the Alaska cruise, we came across this scene with very dark gray stormy clouds, and I thought it made this whole scene look stormy, looked moody, looked challenging, threatening in some respects, but yet you got this beautiful waterfall coming down. You got to make sure you have enough light that you expose to the right so that your whites stay white. Here again in Alaska, beautiful dark gray clouds, but this one gap allowing some light to come through and actually produce a reflection, which we'll look at later. But dark gray light, nice, stormy, moody, feel. It makes you emote, you know. Seems threatening, seems challenging there. And here in Big Bend, this gorgeous storm popped up, but with a gap at the bottom to allow this sunlight to stream through, producing a beautiful color, highlighting the rain. But enough of the clouds where the menace from this storm really feels more apparent, but enough detail in the mountains below. So I love dark gray light. I want to chase it as much as I can. Now, there's a very different category that we don't get a whole lot out here in the deserts of West Texas. This is, again, southeast Arizona. The rain was falling. It was absolutely very heavy rain. You can't really tell it because this is a very long exposure, but if you pull up a video on my YouTube channel, my Big Bend Birding and Photo Tours channel, you will find a video I made about why I like shooting with Olympus. I'm just standing in pouring rain with nothing on my camera. Didn't need to worry about it. Very long exposure, though, so the rain kind of disappeared a little bit. But gives nice color saturation. Here, I was leading a class at a festival in Florida, and it started raining, and everybody with Nikon, Canon, Sony, they started bailing, getting out of the rain. And I wanted to keep shooting because this limpkin was foraging. You'll notice the beads of water on its back that built up. And so instead of maybe like water off a duck's back, maybe we should say like water off a limpkin's back. It was foraging, and the water's dripping off the bill. But I love shooting in rain. You know, high ISO to have a fast enough shutter speed, and you'll still get great images. This particular image is I have a fairly small house up here on top of this mountain, and I don't have many of my own images. In fact, very few. You'll see them right behind me, and those acrylics, including, are taken at the same time I took this image. There was this beautiful storm moving across the Glass Mountains near Marathon, Texas, and yes, it's pronounced Marathon, not Marathon. And I just love the subtleties. The gray light produced this beautiful texture on the mountains. It gave you detail to the rain. The foreground, where it wasn't raining, still had some nice detail to it. But the wet gray light made this scene and ultimately what's on my wall behind me so unique. On Espanol Island, there's a spot you come to in the Galapagos where there's a blowhole. So as the waves, the surf comes crashing in, it fires it up high, and then the mist just drifts across, usually because the prevailing current winds are coming off the ocean there. And birds and other things are over sitting in this. And I love this image because it was backlit, so every little drop of this saltwater mist coming across got highlighted. But yet, I had enough detail in the bird and the rocks to help you see the way this bird lives. I mean, it sits in this mist all the time, you know, and backlit, so you got some nice edging. I had to make sure I exposed properly to balance the backlight highlights, the backlit highlights with getting some detail on the front of the bird. Came across this young mountain coati in Costa Rica, and it had obviously been raining, a little drizzle, and because you can tell by his pelt how wet he is and how adorable. And you see how the greens are nice and saturated to do the wet. So wet gray light is great to shoot in if you don't have gear. You know, if you're shooting something other than Olympus. You know, a lot of people want to say, yeah, I stood in the rain with my Canon, my Nikon. I doubt they would stand in it to the degree I did, and I have. But in fact, I challenge any of them to put them under a running sink to clean them off like I do. But I'll give you this. Whatever you got, if you got to buy a rain cover, buy it. If you need a simple plastic bag, buy it. Get it out in the rain because you get some great shots in it. Here, as you can see, this old fellow was not exactly thrilled because we were standing near some bird feeders where there was some fruit. And he wanted to steal the fruit from the birds, but we were there and he didn't really want to come up. He wasn't habituated to people. And you can see it had been raining. This is in Panama. It had been raining, the wet leaves, the wet foliage. He's got a few little drops on his fur there. But he is not happy. High ISO, fast shutter speed, get some great images. Now, there's a wet gray light that's unique too, where you have wet stones. And you can have several different types of images based on whether or not you're using a circular polarizer. So in this image, I actually waded out into the stream not too far, or I'd have been swept down out into the ocean. But I'm standing at the edge, and I spin my polarizer so that I can cut through the glare and the reflection. Thus, you see more detail and color in the stone. As you notice on the right, you can actually see to the rocks down at the bottom there in the still side. But I did a long exposure. It was raining. It was a beautiful scene, and the wet stones really give it a unique feel. Here, we're also in Southeast Alaska, and I saw this beautiful gull's feather laying on this wet rock and the water droplets on it, magnifying the features of the feather and these wet rocks. So I laid down low and took this shot. And here I allowed a little bit, I used the polarizer to cut a little bit of the glare, but not completely. Whereas in this image, on purpose, I spun the polarizer so it wasn't working. I wanted the reflection. I wanted the rocks to look slick, and I wanted the crab to look slick. I was using a tripod for a long exposure because I wanted to get the waves as they crashed over these rocks, but I needed the crab to stand perfectly still because I had a slow shutter speed. So I got an image here where the crab sat perfectly still, the water flowing over, but yet a little bit of shiny reflection off the rock. Now, hard light is light where it can be extremely difficult to get great landscape images. And in fact, most time, that's when we just call it and head on in. But here, as I was driving along a back road in Big Bend, I noticed still had a really nice moon and a blue sky, no clouds. But I thought, well, if we framed it with some Ocotillo, and it was just about to go behind this ridge, might make a neat image. And while the light is harsh, the moon, without the moon, this image would be awful. But the moon gives the viewer's eye a starting point, and then you come down and check out the slope. Here's another kind of fairly hard light, but there's a nice storm going on here in Big Bend to keep your attention. Again, long lens panoramic. This one I believe I was using a tripod for. But as you notice, there's still very hard light. The shadows are pretty hard, but there's enough color and enough action in this image to make it interesting. One of the ways when you're shooting hard light, if you have clouds in the skies, a polarizer at the right angle can make the sky bluer. And in this image, it works really well because it contrasts beautifully with the green. And the sky through these trees is a nice curvy leading line taking you back to the mountains. So again, looking at the shadows from the trees, you can tell it's very harsh light. But there was no wind, so the cottonwood trees leaves weren't blowing like crazy. Now, I'll be honest, when I get to hard light, my favorite thing to do is to shoot black and white, particularly out here in the desert or here your Great Sand Dunes National Park in Colorado. Black and white does a much better job often at communicating mood, emotion, texture, tonality, because it eliminates the distraction of color. And I love this image, and we had a harsh sun to the left, but these storm clouds building back behind the dunes here. And because of that, it created a really neat scene with the light coming from the side, very hard light from the left, but amazing clouds in the background. Again, similar situation. Lots of clouds, very hard light, right? You can see the angle of the light there, but the storms, the clouds, the foreground produce a very interesting, dramatic image. Again, another long lens panoramic. Another long lens panoramic. This is kind of a medium lens panoramic. So what you're looking at here is Maresco Mine in Big Bend. The light was harsh, relatively, I'd say mid-afternoon. But I knew with the texture and everything going on in this image, I knew that it would be way better to convert it to black and white and help bring out everything that was going on in the foreground and in the sky. Now, hard light at a high elevation, that is different because less UV is being filtered, so the sky is much bluer. Okay, the foliage is bright, and that fall foliage contrasts so well with this blue. Dappled light can be a real challenge, very challenge to photograph well. But I love this image, the trail and the sky, nice leading line, and a lot of great color here. Hard light again, high elevation. Colorado, few clouds, few things going on here, but that beautiful blue sky contrasting with those really nice colors lend itself to a really pretty image. Again, here, Grand Teton, plain blue sky, a little fog down low, but because the sky up higher was so much bluer, and I don't even think I was using a polarizer on this image, but I think it makes this image pop. If the sky were gray, this wouldn't be a very interesting image. You wouldn't have really the highlights there on the tree and on the foreground. Now, when you're at tropical latitudes around the equator, hard light is a little different. Here you see that even though there's hard light, I still got somewhat of a softer image. So it's not the same. You got to work it differently. Here, it's still late morning, but you'll notice the blue-footed booby on the left actually has shadow below, but the bird on the right, which is starting its dive, is well lit. So it's a very interesting image, even though the light is harsh. The colors are brown, so it's not really washing out any vibrant colors. The bluefoot still makes a nice pop there. So it still worked. Now, this is a much tougher situation when you have hard light. I'm looking straight up at these night monkeys in a tree cavity. You just have to work with what you have. If I wanted to photograph them, I knew I'd have to blow out the hard light up at the top. But at a tropical latitude, there's often leaves and whatnot to help diffuse it some. Now let's talk dapple light. I personally think this can be some of the toughest light to work with and get well done. So this is hard light, dappled, but I used a small aperture, f16 or smaller, will get you the sunburst. And the number of rays coming off the sun will all vary based upon the way your lens diaphragm is designed, for the blades of the aperture. And here I like this image. The light is harsh right there in the foreground, but I think it works. This is in Glacier National Park. Here's hard light dappled in the tropics. These are Watson, a very unique, unusual bird, very primitive bird. And you'll notice on the bird there on the right, the lower bird, that the light is fairly dappled on his tail. But I balance the exposure for both to maintain information in both rather than emphasize the shadows of the lights. Here, a black-faced squirrel monkey in the Amazon. The light was incredibly harsh. There were some highlights on his back on the foliage behind. And by converting to black and white, I helped reduce that so that you'd focus more on his face, right? So dapple light can be extremely challenging, but sometimes you get opportunities to photograph, and you have to make the best of it. I love this image, even though it's hard dapple light. I love the expression on his face. All right, let's talk about top light. Soft light, might call it overcast light, whatever you want to call it. The reality is it's going to provide you some great photographic opportunities that you might not otherwise have. For example, here midday near Telluride, Colorado, not many clouds, good clouds. Here's just kind of a thick bank of clouds. But what it allowed us to do is capture the scene, this beautiful national forest road with beautiful leaves and colors all around with aspen trees and a couple of coniferous trees. But because there's no hard light, there's not these harsh shadows cutting across, right? So it gives you this nice, soft, inviting scene, and I find that to be very soothing in appearance. Here is a greater earless lizard here in West Texas. Notice there's really no shadow under him, and if it had been not overcast, but if we'd had hard light, harsh shadows, the beautiful breeding colors on this guy would be washed out. It'd be dull, flat. But here, this overcast light gives us a great opportunity for some really nice color. This is Box Canyon Falls in southwestern Colorado. The canyon's very narrow. There's a little metal grate you walk on. It's got holes. You can't really do a tripod on it. So I had to shoot it 2.5 seconds, handheld, trying to hold it steady. Took a lot of shots with the Olympus image stabilization. I was able to get this really nice, sharp one. But this is very narrow. So the light is usually either very dark on one side and a little bit of bright on the other when the sun's at the right angle, or very harsh coming down. But here, the overcast light diffused the sun so that there are still some shadows, but it's not so harsh, and it actually made for a nicer color image. Side light, or raking light, as it's coming from, in this image, my right to left, I feel for the poor whiptail. His tongue clearly says it all. This beautiful roadrunner got so close, my lens was so long, and stopped for just a second. I had time for just a nice portrait shot. But side light often gives more dimension to an image because it's creating enough shadow that you get that more of a 3D feel to the image. Same thing here, back to Great Sand Dunes. The storm clouds are not built quite as big as they were in that other image, but I love the wind was whipping. Very, 30 mile an hour plus. You see the sand coming off the dune. This is a good example why I chose Olympus over Sony. By the time I walked out into the dunes, there was so much dust in my Sony, I couldn't even shoot. In the Olympus, I was changing lenses, no problem. Never had any spots on the sensor. So you see that sand blowing, that nice raking light gives you wonderful texture and dimension to this particular image. Here with the moose, same thing. I'm down low, Glacier National Park, lights coming from my right, low, and it's raking across the moose, giving the fur more of that coat. It has more texture, more feel, more dimension to it. So again, I really like side light. Falling snow. In this case, the light was a little strong, but the snow falling in front of the moose gives it, I think, some nice dimension. And it lights up the color of the willow, but the snow's pretty harsh here. But it's a nice image. The moose was trotting along as it went. Here's more falling snow with overcast light, though. And what I like about falling snow is, depending on whether it's harsh or overcast, you can get a different feel, and depending upon the lens. Back to this image, I'm using a longer lens, but I'm a longer ways away, so the snow is small and sharp. Here I'm using a longer lens, but I'm closer to the subject, a bison here, and so the snowflakes that are very close to me are very large but diffused, and as you get closer to the bison, the snowflakes are smaller. This coyote plopped right down for us, and the beautiful falling snow made for a really nice image in this case. All right, let's take a look at when we have bright light with snow, like in this image of this bison here in Yellowstone National Park. This can be an exposure challenge, but I love the appearance of this image. I love the tones. I love the light. You see how it's reflecting and bouncing and yet soft in the back. But you really got to be careful. If you blow out snow in bright light, you're not going to recover it. And if you underexpose snow and you try to brighten it, it's going to look ugly and gray. So snow's tricky. You want to make sure you get your exposure right. Here in Yellowstone, shooting into the sun, a little bit of fusion from the cloud. But as you can tell from the shadows, that the light is still pretty bright. It's still a pretty bright scene. So the beauty of mirrorless is I set my aperture I want, my ISO, and I adjust my shutter speed until I make sure all the highlight alerts are gone. Or zebra patterns, as some systems call them. Here we have this black wolf on bright snow. If you're not shooting in manual, the camera would take a look at this bright scene and undoubtedly underexpose that wolf. So you have to be really careful dealing with dark subjects on bright lit snow days. But beautiful, beautiful, setting. Soft snow light. I love a little overcast. If it stays overcast all day in soft light, you can set your exposure and it's going to be the same thing throughout unless you need to adjust your aperture or whatever it might be. This dark-eyed junco here give me the stare down. It's an Oregon subspecies of the dark-eyed junco. We'd had a heavy snowfall out here in Fort Davis. I made sure to nail my exposure. That's ISO 3200, and everybody who worries about shooting at high ISOs, that was on the cover of Texas Parks and Wildlife magazine a couple of months ago. So don't be afraid of high ISOs. Here, this wolf in Yellowstone, again, soft light, nice colors, just a little higher ISO so that you nail the shutter speed. And again, river otters along a river, soft snow light. You can see in the back there's a little bit of shadow, but it's soft. If you look at the underneath where the one otter's resting its head on the back of the other one, the shadow from that is not very harsh. Soft light, high ISO. Make sure you have fast enough shutter speed to stop action. Now with landscapes, what we're looking for is there grass moving, trees moving? Do we want to stop it? Do we want the motion? And then make our decision based off that. Low snow light. This is different than soft. This is when there's very low light. Here I'm on a tripod. It's very early in the morning. The clouds are very thick. Fog, clouds, and this mountaintop, and then these trees popped out and made for a beautiful image, but very low light. Working on tripods here mostly. Again, low light on the snow. The sun's a little higher than it was in one of the images we looked at earlier. You'll notice there's a little bit of red popping out, a little bit of pink wash on some of the snow, and a little bit of blue where it's in shade. So, again, tripod, slow shutter speed, good depth of field. You have to really take into account how much light you have to work with. A lot of people say, I don't like working with a tripod. I can tell you this, if you want to make some of the biggest improvements in your landscape photography, grab the tripod. Here there's low light. This fog is thick, but there's a little bit of light hitting the right side of the scene. But still overall it was low. I was using a tripod because I was using a longer lens to zoom in on this one portion of the Snake River here. And I just got a little distracted because all of a sudden I think I may have spotted an eagle in a tree that I'd never noticed before, possibly. Backlight, rim lighting. Boy, you can get some phenomenal images when you're shooting with backlit subjects. Here, these not cottonwoods, aspen trees with these beautiful fall foliage were backlit. The slope behind, which you can barely make out, is in deep shade. And in color, it's pretty, but in black and white, the emphasis becomes upon the intensity of the light, the transmission of the light through the leaves. Whereas in color, you get distracted by the bright yellows, right? So for me, I really like the way this scene comes across, and much more in black and white. Backlight here, these two desert bighorns, you can see that they have a little what we call rim lighting along the edge of the bighorns. The grass is backlit and diffused, real pretty. She's obviously quite taken with her suitor there, but that backlighting gives this real nice rim lighting. You see portrait and product people using this a lot. Here is a blue-footed booby in that same spot where the mist often comes through. You can see the mist in the background a little bit, but it's not so much near the bird. The wind direction was a little different. But I got that nice rim lighting on the bird. You have to make an exposure decision because you want detail on the front of the bird, knowing that the highlights along the edge are probably going to blow out. But that's okay. That's the look we're going for. And you can do it with landscapes as well, as we've seen. Like right here, backlight into the sun. Here, the rim lighting is falling on the strawberry cactus and the grasses. The sun's low, just came over the mountains, and gives it this beautiful warm texture with that rim lighting. Still some detail in the shadow. Backlit into the sun, looking up I believe this is the Madison River, might be the fire hole in Yellowstone here. And again, the sun gives, coming through the trees, coming over the water, creates a beautiful, serene winter scene. This is a long lens shot up on a ridge in Yellowstone, and you can see it's backlit. This is where there's very high winds up high. They weren't down low. And that is snow blowing over this ridge. So the back of the ridge was pretty treeless. So imagine it takes a pounding from the wind. And so very thick, deep snows had accumulated. And then it's being picked up and brought over the ridge. And then the backlight produces that great variation in shade and bright as the trees break up the light. And the snow, I love this scene, but a long lens was the only thing that really captured it really well. And being backlit, front lit, this scene doesn't look nearly as interesting. You can do silhouettes, both with wildlife and with landscape. I know the topic of this class is landscape, but just talk about some of the principles of silhouettes. You've got to make sure that you have a fast enough shutter speed so that whatever it is you want silhouetted stays black or pretty dark. You don't want a lot of detail in that, or it'll just look muddy. Here is an example. I was probably at 1/8,000th of a second, maybe f/16, very low ISO, and you see the specular highlights off the water, right? Here is an actual landscape silhouette. It's some agave stalks. I got down low. I used a long lens telephoto to make the agaves large. This beautiful scene, backlit. If I tried to expose for the agave stalks, the sky would be so blown out it'd be a horrible shot. Now let's talk about reflecting light. Okay, reflecting light, as you see right here in this image, at night sky image up high elevation in Colorado, this lake, because it's a long exposure, the lake's smoothed out, and you can actually see the Milky Way reflecting in it. I don't normally shoot buildings, towns, cities, but this landscape shot is Petersburg, Alaska, high tide, so the water was up, and it was still, so it was all came together with great clouds, beautiful reflection, very historic building there, and a really unique scene. I love this shot, even though most time buildings and cities don't do anything for me. And here there's a river, but there's this little pocket off the river, so the water stays slower, and the reflecting light was gorgeous, very moody, very stormy. Very mirror-like, and that's a lot of things what I like to look for. But occasionally you get reflecting light that's rough. In this case, on the Orlando wetlands, you have both plants and off to the left a little wind actually making the water surface rough. But it reflected the sun. You get dual sunbursts in this image, and even though the sky wasn't of all that much interest, I tried to crop low enough to leave out a lot of the boring sky, but have the palm trees and the sun, whatnot, in this image. Reflecting light sunbands. Now, yeah, it works great for wildlife, as in this scene with the sandhill crane. I saw the band of light. I saw the crane start walking. I simply set my exposure. You have to have there's a lot of light here. You don't realize it, a lot of light. And I wanted to make sure the bird was dark. So I just waited for it to walk into the band, and then I fired off a bunch of shots and choose the posture of the bird I like the best. Here's a reflecting light band that is a landscape shot. This is another shot, a vertical shot of a similar horizontal shot that I took in the Galapagos Islands. I like the vertical shot because it's really a vertically oriented subject. The sun, though, is not quite as obvious in this shot as it is in the horizontal shot, the starburst. But you see that reflecting light, and that's the sun band, we call it, that goes going across the water there. Without the sun band, it's not nearly as interesting a shot. Here is where preparation plus skill equals luck really came together. I was looking at this, the sun coming through the tree, looking at a starburst, looking at the light, this sun band reflecting off the water, when a pink river dolphin surfaced on the Amazon River right in the middle of it. So, great timing, but fortunately I had the exposure set for the silhouette and for the light, and it just worked out really well. Now, here's where reflecting light ripples comes into play. It's a little easier to see on birds, but it works on landscape as well. Look at all the light coming off those ripples onto the bottom of that gull. Okay, so the light's actually coming from the top down, but there's so much water, so much light reflecting off the water, it illuminates the bottom of the bird as if there was a reflector down there. Same thing here. Look, you can see ripple patterns on the low forefront of this northern shoveler, where the ripples have reflected the light onto the bird. Same thing here. It's a Clark's grebe, and look at the neck. You can see the pattern of the ripples reflected in the neck. Now, this is a unique kind of light, skylight, or blue shade. And here you'll notice I'm at the end of a trail in Big Bend, Upper Burro Mesa pour-off. This is a pour-off, a dry waterfall where when it rains heavy, man, you do not want to be. I'm in a big cavernous room that water has just made a big giant circular dome room out of the stone over who knows how long a time period, and then pours out over and lands into that dry creek bed down below. Well, the sunlight is still hitting the rock outside, but it's not on the rock in this big cavernous room, and you don't want to get too close to that edge. It's an 80-something foot drop. But, so you have this blue, cool light in the shady area and the warm light out there where the sun is striking the rock. Same thing here. The sun is very low in the sky, so the foreground is in shade, blue, cool temperature. The mountain and the sky has a bit of a warm appearance because of the sunlight striking it. Very early in the morning, when the sunlight is hitting the sky in Yellowstone National Park, so you get this, great. This is not a composite. This is how the light was. You get this warm sky with a cool foreground because the light is not landing upon the foreground. So that's that skylight, that blue shade. Golden hour. Man, I threw in a wildlife image here just so you can see this fox, the warmth. He'd been eating a dead porcupine. He got a quill stuck in his jaw. But if you look at the light, I mean, you got that great catch light in the eye. The color of the pelt is just gorgeous. I mean, everything about that light, the texture in the snow. Same thing here with this phalarope. I mean, the colors of the phalarope and the colors of the reflecting foliage on the water. So you got golden hour coming together with reflecting light, right, to produce this beautiful, warm, really nice saturated colors. Again, golden hour. Look at the warmth even in this silhouetted shot, right? So golden hour is going to provide you that special light that we all pursue. Now, what about directional golden light? Well, it can be coming from the side. It doesn't have to. We don't have to be shooting with it. Coming from the side, raking light, but it's raking golden hour light, right? So you get that nice warmth. Here's some beautiful. We finally had some great clouds this one trip into southwest Colorado and Mount Sneffels region and capturing this gorgeous scene. Here it is again with wildlife. This directional light falling upon these desert bighorn sheep. Early in the morning, side light, but it's directional. The direction can also be coming right at you, as in this scene from the upper elevation here where I live. Again, beautiful warmth. We have rim lighting because it is back, but it's low. It's golden hour. So you have several different types of light coming together here. Again, golden hour directional, except yet the clouds are so thick, it changes a little bit. It's still a nice warm image, but it's soft on the foreground. Really unique how one type of light can produce so many different effects. And then at the end of golden hour, it can be really strong. So backlit geese coming in for a landing at Bosque. Backlit sandhill cranes, and went with shot for a silhouette as it was much later in golden hour, right? At the end of it. And golden hour at the end here with this beautiful light reflecting above the city of Alpine, Texas. Blue hour. We talked before about how blue hour can produce some beautiful pastels. I woke up early one morning on the boat in southeast Alaska, walked out, and you saw these gorgeous colors. Even though the sky was thick, there was enough gaps to allow some of the sun's light to come through and give me these gorgeous pastels. This is the Amazon. Again, look at the pastels. I normally don't like the ripples from the boat moving through, but I actually felt it kind of added to the scene with the way it did the light there. And here's a great blue hour with, again, silhouettes, but very different than the other silhouettes you saw, all because of the timing, blue hour. And first and last light, blue hour, man, look at that, I mean, really nice, soft blue light. Same area I took that other shot with more pastels, which was a little later in blue hour when more light was coming up. Here on the Amazon, we're on a tributary in this skiff. We do a sunset ride one night. And again, you see the moon up high, the clouds, that blue light. The sun was way down at this point. Here in Big Bend, blue hour coming through. A little bit of the moonlight shining. And night light, so we get again, a chance to do star trails, nighttime panoramics. But notice the sky is actually black here. I think some wind may have moved my camera a little bit during this long exposure. This was a multi-hour exposure, and I think the wind caused a little bit of rippling effect in my trails there. But gives you an idea of what you can do at night. Here it is with a windmill and the Milky Way. Long exposures, high ISO, or you can stack exposures, different kind of ways, but lots of opportunity to photograph at night. It's a very different, challenging world, though. And here's just a simple Milky Way over the Chisos Basin with some clouds on the right moving. But you can shoot at night with moonlight. Look at how blue it is. Bright moon. This is taken about 3 or so in the morning. I was going to do an engagement shoot. I was waiting for them to arrive. And the Milky Way's coming across, mule ears there, and just a beautiful scene. This is moonlight. That's the moon. That's not the sun. Moonlight on Snake River Overlook in Grand Teton. Love this shot. You can make out some stars, a little bit of a trail, do a long exposure, the little wisp of cloud coming off the peak, the fog moving in low. Beautiful scene. Absolutely beautiful. This was much earlier in the night with Grand Teton. You can see the moon right above Grand Teton. Just a small cloud catching and reflecting some of the light. And then finally, let's talk about some of light that we have to chase. This is light that is not predictable. This is light you have to work on. It's often short-lived. It's usually weather or cloud related. In this instance, we have this big downdraft coming, downpour on the flats outside of where I live here. The photographer must often work quickly, and you must be prepared for capturing this light. If you're one of those that takes forever getting your tripod out of your car, getting your lens together, man, you're going to miss a lot of great shots. When I'm chasing light, I often have my camera and lens attached, my settings where I want them to be, my tripod's partially extended. I'm ready to grab and run and set up. Low side lighting. This is Mount Sneffels in Colorado, and the light is coming, from the west towards the east. This is near sunset, and it wasn't going to last long. Obviously, just a small part of the peak of this mountain is lit up. I knew it'd look better in black and white. Shot long lens. This is probably somewhere between 300 and 400 millimeters at least, I bet. Here, Guadalupe Mountains National Park. Low side lighting. Well, Lee, why isn't this just regular, golden hour? Well, it is, but if you'll notice, it's low, and because of the clouds, it's only hitting on the front peak at Guadalupe Mountains National Park. It's not hitting all the mountains, so that is not going to last long. That little beam of light is going to move. And so I wanted it with that beam of light. I whipped the car over, hopped out, and started shooting. Same thing here, except on this Bighorn Ram. Low, it was going to be changing quickly. And also I had to operate quick because his head angle made all the difference in the shot. If his head turned a little bit more, either way, it wasn't going to be a good shot. Now let's talk about chiaroscuro light. Okay, this is a unique type of light that often doesn't last long. It's often moving very quickly. The clouds and the sun combine here. Early painters often use this to produce some spectacular art. Well, here in this scene, you see God rays, you see the light coming down, producing that beautiful dapple light effect that you see there on the dunes at Great Sand Dunes. Here, I'm in Ecuador, and this bird, the way it comes out at you, I usually use fill flash when I'm shooting wildlife, and I have a shot with fill flash where the bird's evenly lit. But then I got to looking at this shot where the flash didn't go off, and I liked it better because it gives you the sense of this bird, this arsari coming out of the forest, right? You get a feel that this bird's really in the forest. Same thing here in Panama, red-billed tropic bird. The light was actually harsh, but with some clouds and this big cavern, this big opening in these big rocks out in the middle of the sea, gave you this nice dark background, a little light hitting on the trees. But because of making sure I didn't blow out the whites on the bird, the foliage is dark but dappled and dark. I love this effect. You can see a little bit of the rock off to the upper right. Now let's talk about some of the unique lighting conditions. Here, you better be Johnny on the spot. Our boat was trucking along. I went out back and I yelled for everybody, "Sundog, sundog." This requires generally a certain temperature in the sky, cold day, with ice crystals that it's not a rainbow. It produces a rainbow-like effect. But the sun's angle with these ice crystals produces this sundog. I've seen one moondog in Big Bend and had to go pick up a client. Didn't really have time to stop and get some great shots. I got some shots, but nothing I love. Crepuscular rays. The clouds and the sun combine to form, and you see these just amazing colors shooting across this blue sky. This is just looking off my deck off to the west one evening. It was spectacular. Even though the clouds are the rays make it a really unique image. Diamond dust. I don't know if you're familiar with diamond dust, but that's going to require a very cold day. I believe it's either -4 or -10 degrees. You need it somewhat clear and sun, very cold, clear. And what happens is all these crystals start falling, these ice crystals. And that's what you see that look like snowflakes. They're not snow, it's ice crystals reflecting. They're backlit, that's when it's easiest to see and photograph them. You got steam coming off the river. It was so cold. And then the sun's rays just produced, I love this image right here. Here's a partial sundog in Big Bend National Park that really was lovely. I'd never seen a sundog in Big Bend, but this was a wintertime shot. Those are more winter-type clouds here, but it was near the window, so a very iconic location. And more crepuscular rays. This is in Big Bend National Park. Let's talk about God rays. Man, I'm all about God rays. And here, you would know it, but I'm going to tell you, the reason these God rays are produced in the lower right side of the image is because a logging truck had gone down this Forest Service road and threw up a bunch of dust. As far as you know, it could be clouds, mist, whatever, fog. But the dust was catching that sunlight and just made it for a gorgeous scene. Here's some very kind of more obtuse God rays coming across near Telluride, giving a little bit of texture, dimension to the sky. And in Big Bend, some pretty broad God rays coming down. And I shoot God rays of any type, make, model. I love it all. I love God rays. Now, there's a different type of God ray, which we might call a brief spotlight. And that's where there's one big beam coming down, basically just like a spotlight would. And here near Telluride, it highlighted this one part of the foliage. I wouldn't like this as much if it were lighting just the greens, just the conifer trees instead of the aspens. But it's hitting those aspens, and I love the black and white effect on this image. Talk about fortuitous. Remember, preparation plus skill equals luck if you watch the Making the Most of the Landscape Photographic Experience. Well, talk about having stormy skies. Talk about having humpback whales in the area. Talk about the whales coming up, surfacing, exhaling, so that their blow goes right into this spotlight, and then one's tail comes up, and as they begin to dive, I don't know how much more luck you get, but I had to be prepared for the right exposure, the right composition, And this is a great brief spotlight. Just a little bit of sun popping through and the whales did their thing. Here's another brief spotlight, but even though it was brief, I used a long exposure to allow it to move and paint a larger part of the landscape. So the initial size wasn't that big, but by using a long exposure, using a neutral density filter, I was able to capture much more of the scene. Much more of the spotlight hitting the foreground, I should say. Here's a nice brief spotlight down in Alaska. A little bit of a broader light coming across, creating that sun band, but a spotlight also right there in front of the mountain. When you're looking at storm light, I'm often looking for an open horizon because that means at sunrise or sunset, it's going to allow the sun to hit the bottom of the clouds, producing some amazing colors. This was a part of my best, stormy day ever in Big Bend. I would say 14 or so of my greatest images from Big Bend came from this one evening. I actually had a client who decided to quit early because they wanted to take their family to a restaurant to go eat. And I said, "Oh, you shouldn't. We should stick this out." They chose to go eat and missed just absolutely amazing night. For example, storm light, open horizon. This is looking the other direction. I literally was probably 30 to 40 feet apart when I made this image and that image. So that open horizon allowed the sunlight to come through, producing the double rainbow, giving some great light and color. Then here's another storm light. Same year, just a couple years ago, but the sun pops out in a little hole just long enough to light up those extremely dark clouds, throw some light on the foreground, giving some great texture to the foreground. So I love this image. Now, one light I love to chase is when you have dark, stormy clouds that produce this dark background with great golden hour light on the foreground, okay? So, dark, stormy clouds with golden light, bam, that rainbow coming right down at the only yucca. I think that yucca being by itself, not other yuccas, really makes this picture work a lot better. Here in Grand Teton, you got beautiful, stormy, dark clouds, but a lit foreground. I think this is just a hair maybe after golden hour, but still a beautiful image nonetheless. And then here, certainly after golden hour, but a gap in the clouds allowing some light to hit the front of the mountain with the dark, having those stormy clouds, and the contrast of the dark with the white is just beautiful. All right, let's talk about storm light lightning. I find for me that lightning is one of my biggest favorite things to chase. I've got tons of lightning images, and I always love doing it. Here at the Rio Grande River Gorge in New Mexico near Taos, I was using a tripod with an 8mm fisheye horizontal, and I set it up with live composite on the OM system camera so that you get the cool movement in the clouds, plus captured a couple of bolts of lightning. Lightning is a really fantastic subject. A lot of people just go grab any shot of lightning, and it might be a flat, boring foreground or power lines. I still want a nice composition for lightning. Just capturing lightning alone doesn't make a great image for me. It's got to have a nice foreground. So here, I like this because you have the lightning coming down and going up. It's the purple comes from the way the electricity supercharges the nitrogen particles in the air. Beautiful scene here in Big Bend. Well, you also get, when you get storms, you get some rain light and rainbows. So rainbows are spectacular as well. Here in Southeast Alaska, this rainbow coming right down, no pot of gold. I didn't bother swimming over to look, but I just gave it a shot. And I did a long lens pano to emphasize the closeness of this rainbow to us. This evening, I was planning on going chasing reptiles and amphibians, but the sky and the storms got such I knew I was going to be photographing until it was too dark to do so. And I love this because you've got both. You've got that skylight. You've got the blue texture, the blue color temperature on the left side of the image, and a little bit of warmth on the lower right where the rainbow pops in and the sunlight, the last remaining sunlight's kind of hitting that part of the foreground. Again, more rainbows coming down, beautiful front light on these cacti, great texture, and some great storm clouds coming together. Backlight sunbursts. You've seen a lot of sunburst images already, key being f/16 or smaller. And sometimes you have to move even just a fraction of an inch, left or right, up or down. So I want to get the sun just right through this foliage. You can see there were no clouds hardly in the sky, so it was boring, so you had to work harder for great images. And ultimately ended up really liking this image. I was taking some clients to look for some owls in Big Bend, and I look back. I'm always looking at light, reading light wherever we're going to chase it or read it. And I look back and I saw this gap, and I said, we need to stop and get some shots of this. The sun's going to be out. It's going to light up the bottom of the clouds above the mountains, and it's going to throw some cool God rays across the edges of the mountains. And sure enough, must have got 40 or 50 just awesome shots while that sun moved through that narrow gap. Here's the horizontal shot of the vertical one I showed earlier, and you can see how the sunburst shows up better here. A little tighter, zoomed in a little more. So you got the band across, but you got that beautiful sunburst. And I mean, moving just ever so slightly and taking you try to take 1 or 2 images, you may not get the sunburst because it can be a fraction of an inch where all of a sudden the sun pops out. Backlight diffused. I was photographing this cactus room with a client. He would take 4 or 5 shots and stop. And I said, man, you need to keep shooting. This is gorgeous light. You got to properly expose for the front of the bird, in this case a bird, and the back lit. And eventually, this bird was preening, and I knew what would happen. Eventually, those tail feathers spread. You can see some of the primaries from the right wing showing through on the reflection. Gorgeous shot. Client didn't get any of those because he didn't want to take too many pictures. I thought, okay, well, whatever. So these mushrooms, nice diffuse light coming through it, right? You got to chase it because even as the clouds move, sometimes they'd get thicker and there wasn't that much light coming through the edge. Same thing here. Man, the sun was only going to stream around Mueller's Peaks for a little bit. And it produced those beautiful, rays coming across, the God rays. The backlit blue bonnets are gorgeous. I mean, everything about this image I just love. Same thing here. This was not going to last long. The sun, I needed it low on the horizon to give that backlit, diffused appearance. That's hoarfrost on those trees. Long lens panoramic. Beautiful shot in Grand Teton. I don't do high-key landscapes a lot. I do some high-key wildlife. But here, I just felt like the image lended itself. Even though you see the bright sun in the upper left, the lighting on the clouds was fairly even. And I thought, wow, I think this image might look kind of interesting in a high-key tone. Reflected light, again, a little bit different. This is the light you're going to chase some, like trying to get the reflection of the sun. It was going to be moving quick, and I wanted it at the edge of the river, so you don't have a lot of time to work. Same thing here, reflected moonlight on a very low Rio Grande River in Santa Elena Canyon. It was raging the other day with all the rain, so that was a good sight. And ice blue light. Man, it's going to... The reason I include this in chasing is, A, you got to go where the ice is, and B, you have to work different angles for it to look good and look different. So here a little bit of backlit gives some nice light coming through some of the ice, a dark blue characteristic to the rest of the ice. Here it's pretty evenly lit on a overcast day, so we were waiting for this glacier to calve, and this massive chunk of ice fell off. You see the harbor seals all basking up there on the ice flows. But here it's pretty overcast, so the ice looks a little different. Here you have a little different bluish, kind of bluish green, because it's that smooth ice and the way the overcast light was hitting it. This guy was checking us out. Well, I hope you've learned a lot and realized just how much different types of light there are to wait on and chase when it comes to landscape photography. If you'd like to stay up and learn more with me, I'm hosting the podcast Capturing Nature. I hope that you would subscribe. Go to your favorite podcast app, click the subscribe and the like. That would help me out tremendously in working hard to bring you great content and educational material. I cover a lot of different things: landscape, wildlife, macro, gear reviews, outdoor gear, clothing, shoes, travel destinations like the Galapagos and whatnot. So be sure and hop on over and subscribe to my podcast. I shoot for every 2 weeks. It's not always exactly that. I've got some great destinations coming up this year and others. So Galapagos Islands, I go at least once a year usually. This year it'll be twice. Zimbabwe. I do some OM system only workshops looking at 2 weeks in Grand Teton, Yellowstone. Bosque del Apache, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Costa Rica, Yellowstone in winter, the Amazon, Panama. I'm doing Panama for precision camera this year. Some great destinations with a variety of different types. Hop on over to Wildside Nature Tours and Precision Camera's websites to learn more about it. Would love if you'd follow us on social media. Check out my website at tourBigBen.com. And again, Big Ben Birding and Photo Tours on Facebook and Instagram, and Wildside Nature Tours. Hope you learned a lot. That was a lot of information. The great news is you can watch this video as much as you like. Or that might be bad news for you. Who knows? Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you out here in Big Ben. Bye-bye.